When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching. In the recognition that I am inspiration, purpose, and effortless flow, inspiration, a sense of purpose, and effortless flow appears more and more so in our life. As we release the identification to a limited separate self in the mind, we relax back into the stillness and the silence where inspiration spontaneously appears effortlessly. When we take ourselves to be a separate, limited person, listening to and believing the thought narrative in the mind, believing it to be ourself, we box ourselves into a mental prison of concepts and contracted identity. We can only act in line with constricted mental stories about what we're apparently capable of, what's apparently possible. We sit there trying to use our thinking to figure it out and asking ourselves, what do I do? But there is a space around all of this thinking. There is an awareness, a beingness in which this thinking appears. When we relax and zoom back out from the thinking, resting as this boundless awareness that's ever present, we rest in perceptual openness, open to the inner silence within, from which spontaneous insights and intuitions arise. When we conceptualize ourselves to be a separate person, cut off from the whole world, acting entirely independently, and in constant need to accumulate things for security and gratification, we overlook the effortless beingness and flow from which true wisdom and inspiration arise. When we relax back as the open awareness, as the open spaciousness in which feelings effortlessly flow through, the truth about what to do magically appears. Sometimes it may be to sit there with all the stressful feelings that have built up from taking yourself to be a limited individual whose well-being is attached to achieving their outcome and is so desperately trying to work out how to manifest it. Sometimes it may be to fully feel that frustration of trying to force an outcome, let it flow through, and watch it release as you sink back as the openness and the inner stillness. At first, it might seem like an empty void which there are no concepts or ideas within, and yet you trust the silence, you trust the unknowingness. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10 in the New Testament. Eventually, perhaps in a time shorter than you thought possible, you begin to remember your original intention, your original spark of inspiration. You remember what you're doing. You release identification to the one who's trying to know, rest in the unknown, and yet suddenly and counterintuitively, you seem to know. You release identification to the self-imposed limitations made out of mental stories in your mind and rest perceptually open as no one, just the simple presence of beingness in which all the forms are dancing. You trust the inner silence to deliver up the goods because you have ever-increasing evidence that it always eventually does. Sometimes it might take you to release your attachment to the outcome, realizing once again you've consented to believing yourself to be a limited individual who's going to do something to get something, but you don't judge yourself because you realize there's no separate entity there who's going to judge anything. You relax back as the open awareness, allowing yourself to fully feel the sensations in your body, allowing the contracted feelings to relax, and trusting that from the silence, a spark of intuition will always eventually magically appear because you're resting as the open awareness. You're open to inner stillness. You're resting as infinite consciousness, which is intelligence itself. It's the intelligence of the universe, infinitely unfolding and appearing as your life. You tap into the infinite intelligence of the one consciousness by resting perceptually as it, your true nature. You see through the illusion that the mind is the source of true intelligence and that it's going to figure out and force the outcome. You see that the only true source of true intelligence and wisdom is consciousness itself. So instead of looking into the mind for the answers, you look at the one who's looking. consciousness itself. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Meister Eckhart. You're aware of this awareness, resting, perceptually open as this boundlessness, natural acceptance and surrender, natural openness to the intelligence of the universe flowing through you as spontaneous ideas and expression. You witness this aware space in which everything is arising is non-attached to all form. You refrain from boxing yourself into rigid opinions or points of view and relinquish the shackles of needing to be right, prove a point, or prove yourself, for that separate self doesn't exist and all there is the flow of life. So instead of feeling the need to do something, to force and achieve a result, you trust that in doing nothing, the inspiration will effortlessly appear, actions will flow, and results will appear. Instead of believing yourself to be a limited individual whose happiness or fulfillment is dependent on achieving the outcome, you rest as your inherent happiness and fulfillment from which achieving the outcome naturally manifests. You may still take action or exert mental or physical effort, but you witness it as a spontaneous expression of effortless being. You may still use the mind and the thinking, but you refrain from overthinking because you've already learned that never helps you achieve what you want, and it only ever happens because you're consenting to fear and limitation. Instead, you ever increasingly notice when you've been listening to the mind for a little too long, and instead, turn it over to the silence, turn it over to the universe, give it up to God. You have an intention, a want, a desire, and it may well be white hot and burning, yet you don't take yourself to be a separate entity who needs it for security, fulfillment, or wholeness. You know that the only true security, fulfillment, and wholeness is your very own self, your very own beingness. And in resting as this beingness, ideas to manifest what your human level self needs appear. In resting as I am, beingness, you naturally receive inspiration on what you feel is missing in the world, what the world needs, what you would want for yourself, or what you need yourself, realizing it's what others would want or need too in a lot of cases. You don't concern yourself with pleasing others or meeting commercial demands. Instead, you trust that your unique perspective is valuable simply because it's yours, it's your unique expression of the whole, and you are essentially the whole. That thou art, from the Upanishads. And so, you recognize that the creative act involves larger forces than your apparently individual self. And so your conscious mind becomes open to information and intelligence from the larger medium. You view your conscious mind as a kind of antenna connecting to the vast source of creative energy that permeates the universe. And yet you are the universe. You understand that your apparent individual creativity and expression is of something much larger than your individual body or mind, for it is a universal organizing principle that governs all of existence. When you conceptualize yourself to be a separate individual person cut off from the whole, the thoughts and apparent world appear in line with that belief. You can't seem to think of any new ideas outside of your predefined world of biases. You're burdened by having to rack the filing cabinets of your brain, trying to find truly new and creative answers, and yet always turn up empty-handed. As you soften around the contracted identity of a separate person cut off from the whole, and expand it outwards to include others and the wider dream of consciousness itself, ideas spontaneously appear in your awareness from the larger stream of consciousness. You recognize creativity not to be an isolated process, but a conversation the universe is having with itself, as thought forms fire across it, often being caught in your conscious mind, giving you the ability to engage with the conversation through a creative act inspired by divine prompting. When multiple others say the same thing, you pay attention, knowing it might be an opportunity for you to bring something into the world and play your part in the collective conversation and creative unfolding. When you're working, You're fully present, immersed in the act of creation. When you're not actively creating, you trust the process enough to step away completely, allowing your subconscious mind to work its magic and deliver up inspired ideas, often when you least expect it. You love not just the outcome, but the process itself. You recognize the real juice, not to be in the manifestation, but the process of creation itself, including the ups and downs, the successes and the challenges, and all the fears and limiting beliefs you released along the way. The process becomes not just a means to achieve an end, but something that's done just for the love of it. And a yoga of life that gradually brings up all of your perceived fears and limitations to the surface so that they can be set free into the true freedom that you are. Above all, you recognize that your creative work is an expression of your true self and true nature. You don't create to become successful and fulfilled or gain approval. Instead, you do it because it's who you are, a natural outpouring of your being. And in this way, every act of creation becomes a celebration of your unique expression and inherent freedom of your very own being. Imagine this. A paramedic is running up to the scene of a car accident. There's a burning car with someone trapped underneath it. There's someone else there laying with blood pouring out their leg. He stops, looks around at the urgent scene, and thinks to himself, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I know enough or that I'm skilled enough to do this. I don't know if it's going to work anyway. I feel like an imposter. What will they think of me if I mess up? I've got too much fear to take any action, and I don't know my life purpose. Except he doesn't. That would, of course, be ridiculous in this situation. What he actually does is immediately run towards the situation, assess who needs his help the most urgently, and do his absolute best to help them. This is because his actions are clearly linked to the potential of helping someone, and perhaps even saving their life. And the situation in front of him is clearly urgent, requiring immediate action, even if he hasn't completed his training, or perhaps he isn't even a paramedic at all. He runs towards the scene and does his best because people need urgent help, and doing something is probably better than nothing. He uses his intelligence, but in another way, he doesn't think about it. He doesn't have time. He immediately becomes extremely present to the situation, entering a kind of flow state. Of course, not all of us have a situation like a car accident clearly laid out in front of us as an immediate situation. And not everyone wants to be a paramedic. But we do have something within us that we care about. We have a spark inside, ready to ignite into a raging fire, even if it's currently lurking underneath a veil of thinking, preconceived ideas and limitations. It reveals itself when asking questions like, what if there were no limitations? And allowing the silence to deliver up an answer. It may look like a perceived injustice, something that's happening to people or animals that we can liberate ourselves from if we only wake up. It may look like one of your skills intersecting with what someone else needs and your love for engaging with it, just for the love of it. It may be the impulse to communicate a certain feeling through art, speech, or music. It may be something much more abstract, just a hunch or an intuition, or even a subtle impulse to do something that at first you have no idea why you're doing it. Whatever it is, the world needs it. The world needs you. Even if you're currently cleaning toilets, we need someone to clean the toilets or the whole world goes to shit. And even if you're currently cleaning toilets, but you have the desire for something more, something about what you're doing is prepping you for what's to come. Even if it doesn't seem like it yet, the times when we don't feel connected to our true creativity are the fertile ground in which the seeds of our fullest expression are being planted. Instead of trying to find your purpose, you realize you are the purpose. You are the one consciousness, the universe itself, infinitely creative expressing. Be as you are, feel the feelings, release them, and the inspiration always eventually magically appears. For one-on-one coaching inquiries, go to speaktoalex.com. See you in the next video. Peace.